Good afternoon and welcome to the lunchtime news at 1:01 with Paula Donlan and John Morley. Ireland West Airport Knock is facing a near catastrophic situation as passenger numbers over the summer collapsed by 90%. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to a financial crisis for the Mayo Airport due to a collapse in passengers numbers and the stringent travel restrictions currently in place in Ireland. The business communities of Mayo, Galway and Sligo have now united for the first time to call on the government to respond to the challenges currently facing the airport. Ireland West Airport Knock was closed for 3 months this year from the end of March to the start of July, and since reopening has seen a dramatic fall in flights and in passengers, with many staff laid off and others on a shorter working week. The Chambers of Commerce in Galway, Mayo and Sligo are now seeking an urgent meeting with Galway-based Minister of State Hildegard Naughton and the Transport Minister Eamon Ryan to discuss the financial crisis facing Knock Airport. I'm joined now by the CEO of Galway Chamber, Deery, and the Managing Director of Ireland West Airport Knock, Joe Gilmore. Joe, to you first. When we spoke over a month ago, you warned that passenger numbers this year at the airport would fall by about 75%. That situation is now worse, I understand.
Paula, hi, good afternoon. Yes, Paul, unfortunately the situation has actually worsened since we spoke last. We've seen a 90% collapse in traffic over the last 3 months since the airport restarted in early July. So as a result, we're facing a near catastrophic situation, to be honest, in terms of significant losses. We've had to reduce our workforce by up to 50% compared to last year through a process of redundancies and layoffs. We've also, the remaining workforce are working on short-time hours, so we're facing a critical situation as we go into the winter period.
I suppose it's two-pronged in that, OK, passenger numbers are down, but the flights are also down in terms of Aer Lingus still postponing their route to London, and of course the Ryanair services are also significantly down.
Yeah, unfortunately we've seen a significant drop in services. We're operating at the moment at just 10 flights a week, when normally we'd be over 50 flights a week. So we've seen a drastic cut in services. As you said, Aer Lingus are haven't returned to the airport as of yet. So yeah, the situation is critical, and unfortunately, despite all of the cost-cutting measures we're taking, we're facing substantial losses as we face into the winter period.
Multi-million euro losses.
Yes, we're looking at losses in the region of up to 4 million, which compared to a break-even situation last year for a small business like ourselves is close to catastrophe. Are
you worried about the future of the airport, Joe? Can it survive COVID-19?
As we enter this crisis period, we were, like most businesses, of the view that it would be a 3 to 6 month interruption in business. However, as we get deeper into it, and especially for the travel and aviation businesses, we are the first hit and we are going to be the last one out of this. And we're looking at a protracted period, unfortunately, of potentially 2 to 3 years, and experts say up to 2024. So yes, we're facing a very critical period. Now, I just want to say we have got support from government to date. However, today we're calling on, with the support of the Chambers, for an enhanced regional airports funding programme to address what we are now in an extraordinary situation where we're going to have substantial losses beyond what we would normally have. So we're calling on government, and we appreciate the support of Minister Ryan and Naughton to date, whom we've met on a couple of occasions, but now in advance of the October budget, we're calling for critical action by government on this issue. OK,
Kenneth Deery, CEO of Galway Chamber. Ken, you're a native of Achill Island, so you're well aware of the importance of Knock Airport, Ireland West Airport Knock, to this region. Are the ongoing government restrictions on aviation here, because they're, we'll say, different to those across Europe, is that stifling the airports like Knock?
It certainly is. Good afternoon, Paula. The unfolding situation as the weeks go by at this stage has grown hugely concerning for the business community right across the country, but for us in particular in the west of Ireland, looking at Ireland West Knock as being of such strategic importance to us. And our government restrictions are admittedly at this stage out of kilter with the rest of Europe, and we too have been lobbying Ministers Naughton and Ryan in this regard, in that we need some certainty and consistency with what's happening across Europe. Because if you look at global companies that are operating in Ireland and indeed in the west of Ireland, they have bases in other countries as well. And at this stage, there's growing concern as to why we are seen to be that out of kilter. And in general, Paul, it's just I think that the continuing uncertainty and what we're calling for really is intervention in terms of providing the funding supports the airport needs, but also in working with the airlines in terms of ensuring that there will be regional services into the future, is what we don't want to be. And without a doubt, we're in a medical crisis. This is a pandemic. But when this passes, and hopefully, touch wood, this will pass at a point in time in 18 months, however long it is, we want to have a thriving and successful airport in the way it was last year, serving our needs and our business customers, our tourism travellers into the west of Ireland. But that can't happen without intervention from government level
so
at this stage.
You're looking there then at state support for the regional airports, but do we also need to look at the whole aviation guidelines as they are at the moment? I mean, currently there are just 7 countries on the green list to which passengers can travel without restrictions. Do we need to extend that as other European countries have?
That is, I think, one of the difficult questions to answer, because if you look, different countries have different medical teams and advisory teams providing data into what feeds into what's a green, an amber and a red list. And unfortunately, that's a really tricky one to answer, because neither Joe nor I are medical experts, and having a view on that can be difficult. But what we need to ensure, Paula, is that the supports remain in place, and as we need more supports, that they continue to remain in place to keep our airports alive and kicking and keep routes connected into them, because at the moment they're being held in some way hostage to fortune. Joe and the team at Knock Airport run what's a very viable business, over 800,000 visitors through the doors last year, but they're very vulnerable to something that's outside their control. And the imparity at the moment of our restrictions versus others is applying additional pressure to what you're seeing at Ireland West Airport now.
Joe Gilmore, similar question to you. Should we open up the aviation routes more? Should we be flying to more countries without restrictions?
Well, Paul, I think it's on record from the major airlines and the Aviation Task Force, which I was part of last July, that Ireland has taken a very restrictive approach in terms of guidelines and travel restrictions. And unfortunately, it hasn't worked, as we've seen in terms of the recent increases in the pandemic situation. So in our view, certainly from an Aviation Task Force perspective, an airport's perspective, we believe our guidelines have been too restrictive in terms of quarantine requirements, and we do need to urgently look at the whole area of testing, either at destination or arrival airports through the HSE or whatever mechanisms can be put in place, and we'd be fully supportive of that. We would be of the view that, particularly in terms of the UK market from a West of Ireland perspective, it's critical that that's re-looked at and that we can find a mechanism to open up the UK through some form of air bridge urgently to allow commuter traffic, to allow VFR, leisure, business traffic to travel freely. With whatever level of testing or restrictions that need to be imposed.
Because the UK really has always been the biggest market for your passengers.
That's correct, and that's our lifeline. Close to 80% of our businesses with 9 destinations across the UK, and that business unfortunately is on its knees at the moment.
Joe,
So.
you mentioned the Aviation Task Force, which of course was set up by the government, and yet they haven't implemented any of the guidelines or the recommendations that you made.
That's correct, Paula. They have, to their credit, continued with the wage support, which is now the employer support in terms of all businesses, which was one of the recommendations, and their approach in terms of the green list. However, in terms of stimulus packages to reopen air access through stimuluses to airlines, no actions have been taken on that side, or indeed in terms of enhanced financial support packages to the airports to help us through this, what is close to a catastrophic period.
So, Kenny, finally, you're looking now for an urgent meeting with the Transport Minister, Eamon Ryan, and Junior Minister, Hildegarde Martin.
Absolutely. I think some meetings have happened with them in respect of other airports, and I think it's very important that we as a community focus on Ireland West Airport. And I think in particular, Paula, we know of many of the large name multinational companies that are in the West, And what has been critical and key to their investment into the west of Ireland is the ability of their teams to access global markets through Knock Airport, through the UK, and indeed on around the world. And from conversations with the IDA, from conversations with the American Chamber of Commerce, and Mark Redmond, the CEO of the American Chamber, was out this morning on media talking that 95% of their companies are hugely concerned about the position in Ireland and how we're out of kilter with the rest of Europe, and that we need some certainty soon in order to ensure follow-on investment and the sustainability of those high-value jobs, which are so important to us in the West.
Well, hopefully that meeting will take place sooner rather than later. For the moment, Kenny and Joe Gilmore, thanks indeed for joining us.